Out 5 sacks, single game franchise record. I'm telling you what, unbelievable.
And the fastest ever, or the most sacks I should say, for a player under 30, but he's up
5 sacks, a single game franchise record for one of the most dominant defensive players in football. You'd think that would be a day for celebration, a day for headlines to sing the praises of a generational talent. But if you watch the sideline in the waning minutes of that game against the Patriots, you saw something else entirely. You saw Myles Garrett erupt, you saw the helmet slam, you saw the raw, unfiltered fury of an athlete who achieved personal history while his team was sinking. That moment, that single explosion of frustration tells the whole story of the Cleveland Browns right now, and it raises a question that every Browns fan and every NFL analyst is asking. How long can a talent like this tolerate a situation like this? We're not just talking about a bad game, we're talking about a systemic, soul-crushing pattern of almost winning, almost competing, and ultimately falling short. And at the center of it all is a man who just gave a historic performance and walked away empty. Let's break down the game, the rage, and the future of a superstar trapped in a cycle of defeat. The final score, 32-13, barely scratches the surface of the beating the Browns took, but it perfectly frames the magnitude of Garrett's rage. Think about what a 5-sack game means. In the modern NFL, a 1-sack game is a great day for a defensive end. A 2-sack game gets you Defensive Player of the Week chatter. 5 sacks is an absolute dismantling of an offensive line and a terrifying introduction for a young quarterback. For the New England Patriots rookie Drake May, it was a baptism by fire he won't soon forget. Yet, despite being terrorized all afternoon, despite having to look over his shoulder on every dropback, May remained poised, efficient, and ultimately victorious. This is the paradoxical nightmare for Garrett and the Browns' defense. They executed a plan of attack that bordered on flawless, and the offense couldn't capitalize. The defense gave them life, and the offense flatlined. Garrett was an absolute menace from the first snap to the last. He lined up against tackles, he rushed from the interior, he executed spin moves that left linemen grabbing at air, and he simply overpowered others with a pure bull rush that is unmatched in the league. His 5 sacks were not cheap coverage sacks. They were pure, dominant individual efforts that rewrote the team's record books, eclipsing the previous mark. Every sack was a psychological victory for the defense, a statement that they were here to compete, they were not going to roll over, and that they would dictate the terms of engagement. When the commentators announced the single game franchise record, it should have been a crowning moment. But the camera immediately cut to the sideline, and there he was, the record holder, Myles Garrett, face twisted in fury, ripping off his helmet and violently spiking it into the ground. That emotional outburst wasn't a tantrum over a penalty or a blown assignment. It was the manifestation of years of built-up frustration boiling over in a single cathartic explosion. This is a man who was the #1 overall draft pick in 2017, the player who was supposed to be the foundational piece, the franchise savior on defense. He has delivered on that promise, becoming one of the most consistently dominant defenders in the league, a perennial all-pro talent destined for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But every individual accolade, every sack, every forced fumble has come against the backdrop of an organization that struggles to find stability, consistency, and, most importantly, wins. His post-game comments confirmed what everyone suspected. This wasn't about the record, it was about the winning. I don't care how much time's on the clock. They got their starters in. There's a chance we can win. I want to be a part of it, he stated. This speaks to a fundamental disconnect between the players' relentless, competitive fire and the team's decision-making. When a game is seemingly out of hand, coaches often pull key starters to prevent injury, a pragmatic, future-focused decision. But to an alpha competitor like Garrett, being pulled is an insult. It's an admission of defeat, a waving of the white flag, and a stripping away of his agency to influence the outcome. He elaborated on this feeling, providing a window into the mind of an elite athlete trapped in a losing culture. I don't care how dire the situation looks. I want to try to make something happen, so I hate coming out in those situations. I hate that kind of inevitability and not being able to do anything about it because I want to win. I'll do anything. That last line, "I'll do anything," is not just hyperbole. It is the core ethos of a player who put his body on the line to deliver 5 game-changing plays, only to watch his team fall to 2-6 on the season. His frustration is the feeling of having the talent and the will to win, but being handcuffed by the circumstances around him. It is the existential dread of greatness being wasted. The contrast between the two quarterbacks in the game is stark and illuminates the Browns' current structural issues. On one side, you have the Patriots' rookie, Drake May, who despite the relentless pressure, managed the game with maturity beyond his years. He took the licks, 6 total sacks, including 1 from Garrett's teammate, Alex Wright, but he kept his eyes downfield. May finished with a stunningly efficient line, 282 yards passing, and 3 touchdowns on 18 of 24 completed passes. This isn't just about yardage, it's about crucial plays in crucial moments. He connected with Keishan Baute, Stefan Diggs, and Hunter Henry for scores, slicing up the Browns' secondary when it mattered most. The rookie demonstrated the kind of clutch performance and poise that the Browns' offense, led by Dillon Gabriel, has consistently lacked. Gabriel's struggles and the offense's overall malaise are what ultimately negate Garrett's Herculean efforts. The Browns' offense has been anemic, turning the ball over, stalling in the red zone, and failing to sustain drives, leaving the defense on the field for punishing stretches. When you have a defense that is capable of generating 5+ sacks, you should be winning football games. Period. The fact that the Browns are not winning has led to a torrent of speculation, much of it centering on the quarterback position. The elephant in the room is, of course, Shedeur Sanders. The team's draft pick, a promising young signal caller, has been waiting in the wings for his opportunity to replace the struggling Dillon Gabriel. The calls for a quarterback change are deafening in Cleveland. Fans and analysts believe that a spark, a change of pace, or simply a higher ceiling at the most important position on the field is the only thing that can salvage this season, and, perhaps more importantly, salvage the relationship with players like Garrett. The logic is simple. If the offense can score points and hold onto the ball, the defense can rest, and Garrett's elite plays will actually translate into wins. Right now, it feels like they're throwing touchdowns and interceptions in an empty vacuum, their efforts nullified by a malfunctioning offensive unit. This isn't just a 2024 problem, it's the history of the Cleveland Browns franchise. Since re-entering the league, the team has been defined by instability. They have cycled through coaches, general managers, and most famously, a comical number of starting quarterbacks. Myles Garrett has been one of the few constants, a beacon of excellence in a sea of mediocrity. He has carried the weight of the franchise's defensive identity, setting a standard of play that few in the league can match. But there is a finite limit to how much one player can carry. The speculation surrounding a potential trade for Garrett, which has been bubbling up periodically, has now reached a fever pitch. When a player of his caliber expresses this level of public frustration, it sends a seismic ripple through the league. While he seemed calmer in the post-game press conference, his message was loud and clear. He is miserable, and he doesn't like the current situation. The question is no longer if he wants out, but when the pressure becomes too much for the organization to handle. A trade of Garrett would be devastating to the fan base and a massive failure for the front office, but it might be the most humane thing they could do for their star player. Putting him on a contender would allow him to finally convert his individual greatness into the team success he so desperately craves. Imagine Myles Garrett on a defense that is already dominant, paired with a competent, high-scoring offense. His 5 sacks would have been the exclamation point on a decisive victory, not a footnote in a frustrating loss. This thought experiment is what fuels the trade rumors. Teams around the league would liquidate their draft capital and offer huge contracts for a player who, in his prime, is a guaranteed 15+ sack performer and a game wrecker who demands double and triple teams, freeing up his teammates. The Browns are in a precarious position. They must either demonstrate to Garrett that they can compete and win now, or face the very real possibility of losing him, either through a trade or eventually his desire to leave in free agency. The problem, however, extends beyond just Dillon Gabriel. It's about the culture of the team, the inability to finish games, the lack of discipline, and the seemingly endless cycle of hope followed by crushing disappointment have worn on the entire organization. Garrett's outburst is not just about him. It's a reflection of the collective burnout of a team that knows it has the defensive talent to be great, but is constantly undone by its own inconsistencies. He is the standard bearer, and his explosion is the visual representation of the team's current mood. To truly understand the weight of 5 sacks, we have to look deeper into the physical and mental toll of achieving that feat. Each sack requires a unique blend of athleticism, technique, and sheer force of will. A spin move requires perfect timing and explosive change of direction. A bull rush demands a foundation of strength that few human beings possess. To do this 5 times against an NFL offensive line, which is paid to stop you, is a monumental physical effort. Garrett expended a season's worth of emotional and physical physical energy in that one afternoon. And for what? For a 32-13 loss. That disparity is what led to the helmet slam. It was the moment the energy he poured out onto the field came crashing back down on him, devoid of the reward he earned. This situation isn't unique to Garrett, but it is amplified by his generational talent. Throughout NFL history, great defensive players have often had to deal with the reality of being on losing teams. Think of J.J. Watt in Houston before they found some footing, or Bruce Smith with the Bills during certain down years. But Garrett is in his absolute prime, and the window for peak performance is finite. He knows this, and the urgency in his voice is palpable. He's not asking for a rebuilding year, he's demanding a winning effort right now. The decision on the quarterback, Gabriel versus Sanders, is the most immediate and tangible move the Browns can make to appease Garrett and inject life into the franchise. If the team sticks with the status quo and continues to lose, the whispers of a trade will become shouts. The front office knows that keeping Garrett is paramount to their credibility, but they also know that an unhappy superstar is a ticking time bomb. The game against the Patriots will be remembered not for the score, but for the moment of raw, unvarnished anger from one of the game's best. It was a cry for help, a declaration of intent, and a challenge to his teammates and the organization. He gave them everything, a record-breaking performance that will be etched in the team's history books, but it was not enough. And as he stood there, surrounded by the remnants of another loss, his message was clear. I'll do anything. The question is, will the Cleveland Browns do anything to keep a player who is willing to sacrifice everything for a win? The rest of the season, and perhaps the future of the franchise, hinges on the answer to that question. This isn't just about football. This is about legacy, loyalty, and the breaking point of a superstar. 5 sacks, 1 loss, and an explosive declaration that the status quo is no longer sustainable. The layers of complexity surrounding the Browns' situation and Garrett's future extend far beyond the mere sacks and scores. They touch on the nature of organizational expectations, the burden of being a former #1 pick, and the existential weight of a fan base whose collective heart has been broken more times than it can count. When Garrett says, "I hate that kind of inevitability," he is articulating the despair of the entire city of Cleveland, which has watched this cycle play out repeatedly. He is not just a player, he is an avatar for the hopes of the fan base. His intensity is what they wish they could project onto every player in every game. And when he slams his helmet, it's the entire stadium's frustration compressed into a single violent gesture. This is why the organization must tread carefully. A trade of Garrett would not just be a personnel move, it would be the organizational admitting defeat on a massive scale. It would be an acknowledgement that they failed to build a winning infrastructure around a Hall of Fame level talent. Let's dissect the impact of his 5 sacks further. Each one had a ripple effect. The first sack, perhaps, was a standard win against a tackle. The second one started the whispers of a dominant day. By the third, the Patriots' offensive coordinator was having to adjust the entire game plan, using more chip blocks, running more screen passes, and keeping the tight end and running back in to help. Garrett was single-handedly forcing the Patriots to abandon their primary offensive philosophy. The fourth sack was a demoralizer, a sign that no matter what the Patriots did, they couldn't stop him. And the fifth was historical, but it came with a cost. It confirmed his greatness while simultaneously highlighting the futility of his situation. The defensive unit around Garrett is also impacted by his mood and effort. They feed off his energy. When he is dominant, the entire defense plays with a heightened intensity. When his teammate Alex Wright was able to notch a sack as well, it showed that Garrett's pressure was opening up opportunities for others. The fact that the defense recorded 6 sacks and still conceded 32 points is the final damning statistic. It means that when the Patriots weren't being sacked, they were executing nearly perfectly. This points to failures in coverage, or perhaps more critically, an offense that was giving the ball back too quickly, leaving the defense exhausted. The Patriots had the ball and moved it with such efficiency when they weren't getting hit that the Browns' defense was simply worn down by the end. The final blow came when they were pulled, an act of surrender that Garrett simply could not abide. His demand to stay in the game, even when down 3 scores, is a professional mandate. It's the highest form of competitive integrity. He believes that his presence, even at the edge of defeat, holds a chance of turning the tide. A strip sack, a safety, an interception resulting from his pressure. Any one of those plays could have happened. And in his mind, as long as that possibility exists, you do not sit down. You fight. This is the mentality that separates the elite from the great, and it's the mentality that makes him such a valuable player. player, but it is also the mentality that is most easily frustrated by a system that prioritizes injury management over the slim chance of a heroic comeback. The conversation about Shedeur Sanders is the practical answer to Garrett's emotional plea. If the Browns brass is listening to their defensive star, the easiest way to show him they share his hunger for victory is to change the quarterback. Sticking with Dillon Gabriel after multiple disappointing outings sends a message that the team is either paralyzed by indecision or is content with mediocrity. Bringing in Sanders, a high-ceiling rookie, even if he struggles initially, signals a willingness to take a risk, to inject energy, and to demonstrate a commitment to finding a winning formula. It shows Garrett that the organization is willing to do anything to win, just as he is. A change at quarterback is often the fastest way to shake up a locker room and change the trajectory of a season. It provides a narrative reset, a sense of renewed hope, and, critically, a different dynamic for the opposing defense to prepare for. Right now, opponents know what they are getting with the Browns' offense, and they are successfully exploiting it. A quarterback with a different skill set like Sanders could force opposing defenses to respect different parts of the field and the playbook, thereby taking pressure off the entire team. This in turn would give the defense and Garrett more opportunities to make their game-changing plays matter. Looking ahead, the Browns' upcoming schedule is not a reprieve. They face tough opponents, and the losses will only mount if the offense continues to sputter. This means more post-game frustration for Garrett, more speculation, and a greater strain on the locker room dynamic. The pressure on the head coach and the general manager is now at its peak. They are managing not just a football team, but a fragile psychological ecosystem where the greatest player is clearly unhappy. The true authenticity of Garrett's outburst lies in the fact that it was unplanned, unscripted, and entirely genuine. It wasn't a calculated move to force a trade or leverage a contract. It was the involuntary reaction of a supremely competitive athlete watching his historical effort be swallowed by the black hole of defeat. This is why fans, even those who might typically criticize a player for such an emotional display, resonated with it. They saw themselves in his anger. They saw the years of their own dashed hopes in the slam of that helmet. The arc of Myles Garrett's career has been one of individual ascent against team struggle. He has collected honors, dominated opponents, and is on pace to be in the discussion for the greatest defensive end of his generation. But without team success, without a playoff victory, and without the ultimate prize, all those individual accolades feel hollow, at least to him. His pursuit of wins is a pursuit of legacy. He doesn't want to be remembered as a great player on a bad team. He wants to be remembered as a champion. The Browns organization is now at a crossroads. They have to decide if they are willing to prioritize the long-term emotional and professional well-being of their most important player. That means making hard decisions about the coaching staff, the offensive scheme, and most urgently, the quarterback position. They have to show Garrett that his sacrifice is not in vain, that his historically great performances will be rewarded with the only thing he truly cares about, a victory. If they fail to do so, that image of the helmet slamming to the ground will not just be a moment of frustration, it will be the harbinger of an eventual, inevitable departure, a failure that will haunt the Browns for another generation. The clock is ticking, and the sound of his frustrated roar echoes louder than any single sack announcement. The team must act, and they must act with the same urgency that Garrett shows on every single snap. That is the only way to avoid the fate that he so eloquently describes, the inevitability of losing. The question is, can the Browns break the cycle before they break their greatest star?